looking at this hive, this is what I would call a hive that's just almost perfectly ready for winter. And so let's take a look at what that means. You know, the bees have already kind of run down in the box a bit since I've opened it. But when I opened it, you know, at least 80% of this top box was full of bees, which is fantastic. That's what I'm looking for. And most of the frames in this top box are full of honey, just like this. You know, I mean, that's frame very full of honey, mostly capped honey. You can see the bees are kind of finishing off capping it in the middle here. Both sides are pretty much full of honey. And then we've got a couple frames that still have some foundation on them that isn't completely drawn out because we added some foundation to this hive after the honey crop. But, you know, we've got some honey here in the middle. This next side, look at that brood. So we've got some great cap brood in the middle. We've got eggs and larvae as well, still in this hive. And, but not a lot of brood up here. You know, there's, you know, 2 frames of brood. There's another frame of brood. And the bees are starting to like slowly fill in the space and reduce down the amount of brood the area there is. But they've got 2 frames of brood up here in the top box. Here's another half frame. So all in all, about 2 full frames of brood. I'm not seeing a whole lot of pollen, which is a little bit concerning to me. These hives still need pollen patties, in my opinion. They're still raising that final bit of brood that's going to have to survive throughout the rest of the winter. They're raising the final bees that are going to have to survive through the winter. And we want to make sure they've got plenty of proper nutrition, you know, up through November until the last bit of brood is done being reared. And in areas that are drier, you know, there's certainly pollen coming in, but not necessarily enough. And so, you know, this hive is a classic example of one that is strong and doing well and still rearing brood, but they could use a pollen patty to make sure that that final brood that they're rearing is reared properly. They've got about, by lifting it, you know, they've got about 40 pounds of honey up in that second box, which is great. They certainly don't need food. Get our beetle traps out of the way here. And in the bottom box, I'm expecting to find a fair amount of brood, yeah. So we've got some more beautiful brood. We've got a little more pollen down here. This frame's a good example. They've got some brood, but if you can see in all those middle cells, anywhere there is not capped brood, they filled it with honey and pollen. And they're kind of naturally starting to squeeze that brood nest a bit because, you know, the queen, they're going to start shutting that queen down. And I expect to see that. And this is where you want to be careful not to overfeed, because you want to make sure they've got room to continue rearing brood as long as possible. So this hive is naturally starting to squeeze down this brood nest even without us feeding. So, you know, a hive like this that already has, you know, 40 pounds or so honey up in that second box, I'm not going to feed this hive at all. I may not feed it at all the rest of this year if they've already got that 40 pounds in the second brood box. I'll check them again, you know, in 2 or 3 weeks once this brood really starts hatching out, and see if they've consumed, you know, a bunch of that honey in the second box. But in general, you know, a hive like this isn't going to need it once they've already hit that 40-pound mark. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I mean, all said and done, in between the 2 boxes, I've probably got 7 to 8 frames of brood in this hive, which is really, really good for this time of year. So great amount of brood. This hive is fantastic. They've got a great bee population in both boxes. You know, all I'm really going to do with this hive is give them, you know, probably 2 or 3 more pollen patties through the month of October, and monitor their syrup or their food levels, and that's it. And this hive is probably going to survive the winter perfectly. So if you've got a hive that looks like this, you're in great shape. Give them a couple pollen patties. Consider doing a varroa mite test to make sure the varroa mites are still low. But other than that, you've done your job well, and they're pretty much ready for the winter.